So it's February 10th, 2014, and here we are on the second session of talking about your early life. What I wanted to, unless you have any objections, I kind of wanted to hear about your, we talked a lot about your father, the father's side of your family. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your mother's side of your family.
Well, my mother was born on a farm. She was born in, I can see the bedroom that she was born in the farmhouse up in her parents, my grandparents' farm. And we would go back there for all of our summers, we've already talked about. But she was raised on a farm that was a very, very well run and had some considerable history. I think my grandfather's father was also on that same farm.
Wow.
My grandfather's name was Gifford. The next farm over was a Gifford farm, brothers, and the farm was a dairy farm. I forget how many head of cattle. It was something in the neighborhood of about 50 head of cattle, and a long time before that they had decided on having Holsteins instead of what were then the other kind of cows that they could have bought, and that's either Guernsey or Jerseys, which produced richer milk. Mm-hmm. But the Holsteins delivered so much more milk that they decided to make it a Holstein, and they had a champion herd. Mm-hmm. They really, every once in a while, they'd win a prize for so much production per cow, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And by the time I came along and started spending boyhood summers on that farm, I remember that I'd go often on the milk run in the morning. Every morning, the last night's milk and this morning's milking would have been pasteurized because they had set up their own. It would have been pasteurized to take the big milk cans and put it on a truck and take it down to the milk plant, which was in the little town, Genoa City, just down the road a piece, and actually just past the other Gifford farm, as a matter of fact, is where the town was. And so she grew up on that farm. They apparently had to rebuild part of the house at one time, and it was built out of concrete blocks. When I talk about concrete blocks, I'm talking about blocks like this, big, huge blocks. Mm-hmm. And they had also already had a sort of a shop area with upstairs, a second floor, where there was pretty substantial apartment size-wise up there, which nobody was using during my boyhood time there. But apparently the family had been in there and spent some time there while they rebuilt some of the farmhouses and so forth.
Yeah.
It was quite a farmhouse. There was enough room in that farmhouse it was a multi-family farm. My grandfather and my grandmother, until she died, were there, and then my grandfather had 5 daughters. My mother was the oldest. Then there were another sister, and then there were twins. And one of the twins and her husband and their son were on the farm. Lived in the same big farmhouse.
Yeah.
And then there were also workers. We had, I think, at that time, my grandfather had a couple of workers that lived on the property. So there was a big barn, hay up above. One end was a stables for horses and some donkeys, and then there was a pasteurizing room, and then there was the manure cart end over there, I remember. And then across the little road that went down to the fields, the pig area and so forth, was this little concrete block building. And there was a shop underneath it, complete with anvil, the big anvil, and a blacksmith set up and so forth to do repairing, and big shed kind of an area. Young boys. I had a cousin there that lived there, and I had cousins that lived in the town who would be out an awful lot. And we got into a lot of trouble. Great deal of trouble in the summertime. A lot of fun.
I bet.
A lot of fun. The house was unusual. The dining room was big enough and had a big, huge table in it. The dining room was big enough that all of the hands and the family and families, and in the summertime, my mother and my brother and I, there was all room for all of us to be able to eat around it.
Yeah.
And it was really rather remarkable that there was so much room.
Yeah.
Underneath it was a double car garage and then a lot of basement storage area for things like a potato bin and other storage area. But along the wall of the garage, I'll never forget it, in the early years, the road out front was gravel, was not paved. There were no power lines. The power for the house was generated by the windmill, had a generator below, and then when there was no wind, there was a one-lung motor that would run a generator at the windmill site. And one whole wall in the basement, alongside with 2 cars in line could park. One whole wall was full of shelves with great big glass batteries. Glass cases, just like the car batteries that we have, only it's bigger. A glass case with the water in it and the lead, whatever they call them, that make the batteries work. And that system would keep enough light for very basic light. That's all. There was no power equipment in the kitchen.
Okay.
None.
Yeah.
There was no gas on the property, but there was no such thing as being tied to a line, a power line. That's the way it was, and it was quite a significant day when the power line finally came down, and they got on the line. I was a good deal older by then. I forget I must have been about 8, 9, 10 years old.
Okay.
By that time when that happened.
What do you remember of your grandparents?
My grandfather was a quiet man, very quiet man. My grandmother was delightful. I remember she was just full of vigor and vitality and very very loving and took care of everybody, and she made the best gingerbread in the world. Gingerbread unlike what we call gingerbread. It was a kind of a bar kind of a thing that was just and she had a great big glass jar shaped like this. I remember the great big cover on top, and we used to love to, when nobody was looking, go in there and sneak in there and take a bar or two out and run away and enjoy them. She was a delight, and she and the other ladies in the house would always keep the stove going and get it going in the morning and keep it going. And my grandfather was very, very quiet, very dignified, knew what he was doing, very, very professional, in charge but quiet, very, very quiet. And I remember always at dinner time, chores would be done, he'd be in the house, and there was a rocking chair in the front living room that he used to always go and sit in a rock, and it had a certain creak that would, and he'd just sit and just rock, and it was a delightful, one of those memories that, you know, I can smell the smell of the room, and I could just remember the sound of that, and just the quiet little smile on his face. And once in a while we'd talk, and he was pretty tricky. He used to love to say all sorts of little tricky things about me. He'd do it with a straight face and make fun of me as a little kid. It was a good time.
That's excellent. What would have been like? What kind of food did you guys eat
on the farm?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, pretty darn well.
Yeah.
There was a lot of canned meat. They would do a lot of canning, and they would do a lot of canned vegetables and fruit. They had a big garden there. One of our assignments, my brother and I were often to go over the garden and pick carrots or beans or peas or whatever, and bring it in for them to prepare for dinner. But we'd eat very well. Mm-hmm. And I've been spoiled forever for milk.
Mm-hmm.
because we didn't have just milk, which nowadays Becky laughs at me because I call it white water really most of the time, because it was milk that had some flavor and some substance to it. We were on a dairy farm.
Yeah.
We'd have big pitchers full of milk all the time, with the cream.
Yeah.
That we'd have to stir in and make sure that was. Let's talk about all the cancer stuff that would, or not cancer, but heart disease that was built into every single glass of stuff. We ate very, very well.
Excellent.
Very well. All year round. I remember we were there for one Christmas time. And even then, we'd still eat very, very well because they had so much canned stuff.
When did you guys stop going to the farm on a regular basis?
It must have been about the time that not very far from the beginning of World War II, which started in December '71. We may have even in the summer of '41 gone there, but I don't think so, because that was the summer that my father took a job up in upstate New York, and I think we moved from New York City at that time to Houghton, New York, and so I'm guessing we probably did not go to Wisconsin that summer. I just don't remember, but I'll bet you most every summer before that.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
What was it like when your parents met? I seem to understand something about missionary training.
Well, my father came here as an immigrant, you know that. Spoke already very fine English, much better than I ever did, because he was brought up in a family where the English language was pretty basic. It was a second language, but it was a schooled British English language, and so my father spoke, and his brothers spoke very, very well and properly. And I think I told you the story about when they landed in New York. They thought they were in the wrong country. The Bowery is not famous for good English. But somehow or other, through he and his brother in New York City, after they arrived there in the early 20s, they ended up with a mission group called the Christian Missionary Alliance. And they met, and my mother had gone there. I don't know why, whether she thought she'd be a missionary or what. My grandparents were very strong Christians. There was a little small church, country church in the town, Genoa City, tiny town, and they would. So it was kind of what we would now call a Bible church.
Okay.
And the Christian Missionary Training Institute, which it was called then in Nyack, New York, across the Hudson River from Manhattan, would be a place where a lot of the Bible church kind of people would go for higher education. And so my mother met there, and somehow or other my father ended up going there as part of his beginning of his life in New York City, and that's where they met. And sooner or later I came on and ruined their lives forever, probably.
And then the Great Depression, you know that story.
Oh boy, that's right.